You have coached so many people in these high stakes situations, everyone from Kim Kardashian, Jeff Bezos, countless superstar athletes and CEOs. What are some of the common issues that even high performers struggle with when it comes to speaking, and how do you coach them through it?
I had an individual session with Kim.
Yeah.
And she was about to be in a forum that was just not her usual forum. She was going to be interviewed by Steve Forbes in the most powerful women's summit, or the most influential women's summit. And she was going to be talking about Skims, and she wanted to be wearing the hat of an entrepreneur and a businesswoman. And so it was really just about how are we messaging around this and how are we executing? And she said, I think this would be great for my entire family because we've actually never been media trained. I thought, really? How is that possible?
Yeah.
And she said, no, we've learned from doing. And although we feel really comfortable in front of the camera, we don't know what the ground rules are. And they had done, a recent interview that I think went a little sideways and they weren't happy with how it went. So they wanted to be able to have influence over the direction of the conversation, but not overtly make it seem like they were hijacking the interview.
Yes.
Which I think is a really finessed point. And when we watch other people being interviewed, particularly politicians, and they, in a very clumsy way, say, well, I'm not here to talk about that. What I am here to talk about, that is the worst possible way to control a conversation because it's so transparently manipulative. And what we coach people at my company to do is, how do we create the impression that this is a spontaneous give and take conversation that we're having right now, and not make it feel messaged and make it feel genuine? And the idea is it should be genuine because this is material that we've tossed around in advance that represents your best storytelling and your deepest thoughts and your point of view on things. A lot of publicists have said, oh yeah, no, she's great. She's done 1 million interviews. She's famous. She knows how to behave on camera. So that's not what this training's about. In fact, the more famous she is, the more challenging it's going to be for her to pull the conversation to where she wants, because there's so many things of interest they'll want to talk to her about.
So it's really in that prep piece, it sounds like. And it might be, so I want to talk about this on 2 tracks, because obviously folks at that level, they're going to have a communications team, potentially. They're going to have the PR. They're going to have people that are kind of setting up. Someone like me, for example, or so many folks in our audience, they ain't got that, right? So they're probably the one booking it, or it might be, maybe they hired a temporary PR team for a book launch or something like that. How would you recommend, just so we have it clear, that if it's a solo person and they just landed a big podcast or they just landed a big media get, how would they request, again, not for the questions in advance, but to make sure that they're showing up in a way where they can both deliver for the interviewer and the audience and also win for themselves?
Traditionally, the way people have prepared for media interviews is a little bit backwards, in that they sit down and they try to predict every possible question they could be asked. And then they craft answers to those questions. And that's what you see reflected in one of the worst training tools on the planet, and that's the suggested Q&A document, or the FAQ. I've never known anybody to really thrive with that tool in front of them, because what you get is this mess. It is about 7 or 8 pages long,
yes, about
70 questions. The questions are written out verbatim, and so are your answers.
Yes.
And I've never seen anybody in the middle of an interview say, that kind of sounds like the question in the middle of page 5. What was the answer to that? It's not happening. So instead of preparing from a very defensive posture of what am I going to be asked and then what am I going to say, sit down and ask yourself, what are my greatest hits? Not just in terms of my talking points and the messages I want to convey, but what are the stories I tell that really illustrate those points in a relatable way? What are some examples I can give to make it specific and visual? Is there a data point or 2 that I can deliver with context attached to it, not just spewing out numbers? What are the best components of my narrative? And now let me look at the questions as openings and opportunities to get to those things. Yes, from a defensive posture, I think you should always be prepared for what we would call the doomsday question or the Achilles heel question. What is totally reasonable that I could be asked that would put me a little bit on the spot? And if it exists on the web, there's a good chance your interviewer is going to know about it. Don't think that they're just showing up unprepared.
Right. I pay such close attention when I'm watching anything because I think messaging, first of all, it's so fascinating. And to me, from my lens, it's marketing to a certain degree. You are selling a perspective, you're selling a possibility, you're selling a mission, like all of that comes through in your words. And so I'm fascinated by this particularly because when a hard question comes at you, and to your point, it's like, well, I'm not here to talk about that. You're like, sometimes I see it as strength. Like I've seen, for instance, like I've seen Nancy Pelosi like, oh, I don't worry about that. And then she like instantly shifts, you know what I mean? And she goes over to something and I've seen her do it masterfully. And then, you can watch someone like President Trump, just someone will ask a question and he goes, and I'm always just watching communication because I'm fascinated with it. So in the context of it could be the Kardashians, it could be anyone. It could be a CEO in a high stakes situation where the stock has plummeted. Do you and your company train people to be able to not only address the question, but still control the narrative? Because I feel like that's a razor's edge of a dance, to not feel like someone's avoiding it and to redirect.
Well, what do you hear from people sometimes is, oh gosh, are you going to turn me into a politician here? Because I'll say to them, have you ever been media trained before? And they'll say, yeah. I say, what did you remember from that session? Don't answer the question. I think, wrong answer. That is not what it's supposed to be about. I would say most people going out to be interviewed, probably 85 to 90% of the questions they get, probably pretty benign.
Yes.
Probably just very straightforward. There's no trap door. There's no third rail. And what we coach people to do is let's decide what our simple, concise, declarative sentence that leads the answer is when we get asked a question on this topic.
Awesome.
And because the reason we hate politicians is because they don't answer the question 100% of the time. So now I'm only asking people to potentially not directly answer the question 15% of the time.
Yes.
And then it doesn't become this tell that now you're not having a real conversation with somebody. So that's what I coach people to do. Here's how we're going to lead the answer. And here are the other important things we want to convey when this topic of conversation comes up.
I love that. And so for anyone watching or listening right now, if they're getting ready for a podcast interview, again, they're on a book launch or they're trying to pitch their new product service idea, it could be on social media or it could be to get VC funding. Some of the ways to prepare for people to ask you questions like do's and don'ts. It sounds like understand some of your greatest hits, right? Have those key stories down. And I actually want to tell a story about how I had to shorten my story to get on the Today Show, which is right into where we're going next, brevity. Your greatest hit stories, having a couple of data points and context, being able to go right into an example if there's a context, maybe a definition or something that's unique to you and say, oh, here's an example of X, Y, or Z. Anything else that we can do to show up? Again, if we don't have the benefit, I want everybody to get your damn book. This is so good, y'all. It's so rich. And I was telling Bill off camera, I was like, I'm reading and I'm like, oh, wow, I need to practice that. Oh, wow, I need to, there's so much in here. So this is a Bible. But is there anything else for people to get started in a prep for an interview that you would want to tell them?
Whenever I write an email to somebody, when I finish it, I'm never feeling like I'm finished. My first question is, how do I cut a quarter out of this?
Me too. Yes.
That's great. 25% of this I know can go right away. And how can I get it down to 2 or 3 lines? So I would say that most people overtalk.
Yes.
And the quickest way to lose an audience is to go on some rambling, circuitous, redundant narrative where people, inside they're thinking, I get the point, just like move on. And you never want to overstay your conversational welcome. Every answer can come down to a more concise response. And I think that is a discipline you develop when you understand that when you begin to talk about something or you begin to answer a question, what I'd like you to do is have a general conception of what the arc to the finish line looks like and what the finish line consists of. Doesn't mean you have to know the answer or what you're going to say verbatim, but it does mean structurally, how am I getting from point A to point F? And if you can't see the finish line by the time you open your mouth to talk, you're talking too long.
I love that.
That is probably a good litmus test.
I also love, too, that you said from A to F, which, again, this is how my mind works. You didn't say A to B or A to Z. You said A to F, which is unexpected. And being unexpected and being original in how you phrase things.
You're a master at this.
Thank you.
The scream job, right? The scream job is your creation, and it's brilliant for a number of reasons. One of them is it falls into two of the categories of a chapter we have called the Magnificent Seven, which is the stickiest ways you can present your ideas. So the scream job in your world is a twisted cliche.
Yes.
Because everybody's thinking it's the dream job, but it's actually the scream job. And it's also something that I call a creative label. And when we give labels to things, people tend to remember them really well.
Yes.
You have the added benefit of it being an acronym, which makes it doubly memorable.
Yes.
So you're totally on track with this.
I'm such a nerdy person when it comes to words, and we'll talk more about that.
Yeah.
But okay, so speaking in public, like this is one of the things, first of all, I was so excited because our mutual, my dear friend Ramit is who actually introed us, and we'll talk about that later off camera because Ramit's awesome and I'm excited. But one of the things I've always often told my friends is like, even though I do this for a living, speaking in public is not my favorite thing as it comes to stage work. And we'll get to preparation later because I want to just reveal to you how I torture myself. And, you know, you might be able to give me some tips to help. But I think speaking in public also terrifies most people. We know this. Why do we struggle so much to communicate? And what are some of the most common general mistakes that we all make? Brevity is one of them, and being long-winded, which I can be guilty of.
Jerry Seinfeld has a great joke about, you know, they took a survey of the things that people fear the most, and public speaking was number one, death was number two. He said death was number two. That means if you're at a funeral, you'd rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy. And there's a lot of truth to that. And we find that the more prepared you are, the less nervous you'll be. That is an unshakable ratio. But years ago, we worked with Susan Cain, who wrote the book Quiet.
Yes.
And it's a great book. And one of her theories is that when we stand on a stage and we look at 100 pairs of eyeballs looking at us, it triggers something primitive in us where we may have been dinner or prey to a pride of lions eyeballing us and sizing us up. So there is a fight or flight kind of instinct that kicks in. And we have a whole group of tactics that people can employ to try to minimize those nerves. Everything from the right kind of breathing before you go on stage, because most people, when they get nervous, start mini hyperventilating. They take shorter, shallower breaths, and they're not even really aware they're doing it. And what happens is they're actually depleting their lungs of the air they need to project. So when you go on stage or you see somebody presenting in front of you and they get that shake or tremble in their voice, yes, that's nerves, but that's really a lack of wind that they need to project. So a few good deep yoga breaths before you go out there, where you hold this long intake at the top, slowly exhale through your mouth, does slow your pulse, and it also replenishes your lungs with the air you need to project. So that is a good tactic. But also just finding 4 people in the audience who are good, encouraging listeners, the smilers, the nodders, the people who are giving you that affirmation that it's all going well. And if you can find those 4 people in each quadrant of the room, and now shrink the room and realize I'm just talking to 4 people and they're totally loving what I have to say, and move it around the room, that's going to boost your confidence. The last thing I ever want when I'm in front of a room is to catch the eye of somebody who's like doing that on their phone and think, oh my God, I am bombing up here.
Oh.
Right. It's a real confidence killer.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to watch myself because I'm from Jersey and I have been known. I just call people out, and you know what I mean? So, but you in more intimate environment, like, hey, what are you doing?
Yeah. Or, we could take a break if that's really important. But the other thing that happens that kicks in, Marie, is that people, when they get nervous, adrenaline makes everything speed up.
Yeah.
And the last thing you want to have speed up is your vocal pace. Because the faster you go, the more mistakes you're going to make. The faster you go, the more filler language you have. And there is something inherently apologetic about speaking fast. It's almost sending a message to the audience that you don't deserve to have the floor. And I know that you're bored. You're not really interested in what I have to say. So if I just blow through this, you'll be bored for less time.
Yes.
That's the subconscious message you're sending.
I have an example outside of the world of speaking, but inside of the world of performing. My birthday last year, Josh and I went to an Usher concert.
Oh, great.
Because I am a lover of the Usher and all of my 90s hip hop. And we were so struck how much time Usher takes with everything. And I was eating up every second of it. And Josh and I were commenting after. Josh is an actor. And, obviously this is what I do for a living. So again, I'm fascinated by people on stages and just observing their presence, observing every aspect of production. And I loved when he would just stand there and say nothing, as a counterpoint to what you were saying in terms of rushing and I'm not supposed to be there. He delighted in having all of us, the entire audience, like I don't even know how many thousands of us, mostly women, but a good number of gentlemen as well, who were eating up our ability to just be with him and his allowing us to just kind of be in his presence, and some could perhaps interpret that as like a sense of cockiness. I was like, I'm so here. Like everyone was so present and it was so captivating, even his dance moves. So I'm a dancer. And part of why I went to the concert was to see Usher and his moves. And there was one part of the show where he had roller skates on. That classic 80s, 90s. If y'all are old enough, you know what I'm talking about. These are not rollerblades. These are roller skates.
Yeah, with the two in the front, the two in the back.
100%. And it's like a whole jam that goes down. And it was brilliantly choreographed. And I loved most the parts when he took it slow. And so I think that note of slowing down, it's so counterintuitive to so many of us, but it is such an effective practice. I want to talk about lack of brevity and being long-winded. This is something we talk about in writing copy as well. We were talking about our emails. And I'm constantly looking at my messaging going like, when my first draft is written, I'm like, damn, you say a lot, girl. You know what I mean? And I'm like, that can go, that
Did
can
all
go.
that come out of my mouth?
Seriously. Sometimes, this is an aside, when people have interviewed me, they're like, can I interview you? And I'm like, okay. And then what winds up happening is they record the conversation and turn that into an article. And then I see it and I sound like a friggin' idiot.
Well, you're reading the transcript.
Yes,
you're not
sir.
reading what they wrote.
Well, they didn't.
Yeah. And it's interesting because if you look at the transcript, if you're doing research of somebody who's been interviewed on a TV show or on the web, and you look at the transcript, it does look somewhat illiterate for most people.
I'm like, I'm an idiot.
Yeah, wow. But and you're hitting on something really important, Marie, and that is there are two styles of writing. There's writing for the eye, which is what happens when you sit down at your laptop and you bang something out. But there's also writing for the ear, which if you've worked in the media, you develop this ability to write the way you speak. And stylistically, they're very different.
Yes.
And so when we're coaching people to develop their content, what we implore them never to do is sit down at their computer and write it. Because when they get up to deliver it, it's going to be long-winded, complex sentences, introductory phrases, parenthetical clauses. Nobody's going to want to listen to that.
Yes, sir.
And it's also very difficult to deliver that in a conversational, casual way. It typically sounds very formal, very stilted. What we tell them to do instead is make an outline for yourself of what it is you want to say in this talk. And you can make the outline as sparse or as extensive as you want. And then roll on an app on your phone, whether it's Otter AI or some other app that will record and transcribe for you. And just get up and say it as it would naturally come to you. And don't worry if it's full of starts and stops and mistakes and hiccups. That totally doesn't matter. Just keep plowing forward. Then take the transcript and export it to a Word document or whatever you're working from and make that your rough first draft. And what you're going to find is it's in a choppier, fragmented style that more closely reflects the casual and conversational tone that we're looking to strike. But maybe even more beneficial is you're never going to be at odds with that content. And I hear this a lot from people about how long a process it is for them to feel like they own the content that somebody else has written for them, which is a really difficult thing to do. You're never going to be at odds with this content because you thought it and you said it already. It represents instinctively how I'm meant to communicate this, which is never going to happen if you're taking a prepared content from somebody else. And it's really not going to happen if you're relying on ChatGPT to do it for you.
Totally.
Because not only did you not write it, you didn't even think it.
Yes.
Somebody else did.
I'll tell you. So I think it's been, what is the year? It's 2025. It has been over 25 years of me doing this kind of work. And I say this kind of work and just like sharing ideas and writing and training and creating courses and stuff. And over the years, I will say that I have been hard on myself because I have always created all my own stuff. And even though throughout my career, I've had copywriters that help, sometimes on my team, they'll be like, oh, Marie, let someone else create the slides. I'm like, that don't work. I was like, everything out of my mouth, even for myself, writing everything is Figureoutable. It was like, that's me writing and me creating courses. I script my courses, but I'm like, my spoken nature is a completely different Marie than my written nature Marie.
Right. And don't let people try to convince you you're being some kind of control freak.
Right.
Because you're not. When you delegate to somebody who doesn't have the ability to mimic your voice, you're just setting yourself up for a lot of disappointment.
And they feel terrible because they feel like I'm not accepting their work, but I'm like, that is not how this brain is configured.
I discovered that with my first book 10 years ago, and I'd never written a book before, so I wanted a co-author, and she was great. She was tremendous at structuring out the book and making it really appealing. And she was also going to write it based on this enormous idea dump that we had. And I read a chapter and realized I got to write this thing, every single word.
Yes.
Because I would not want anyone, no one would read this and think, that doesn't sound like Bill talking to me.
Totally. And I will say this, when I read this one, and I know you had a co-author on this, but even though I don't know you, it felt so wonderfully conversational, and you are super funny. Just
Thank
so
you.
there are we're going to talk about some of the things that I was like with my coffee and I'm laughing out loud. I almost spit out my coffee this morning with a couple of things, which I'll point out to you. But I did want to say one thing just to, again, emphasize the importance of what Bill teaches both in this book, in his company, and just how critical this is. So when I was doing Everything is Figureoutable, actually, I think I brought it. Oh yeah, I brought it with me. I printed it out for you because it's like the power of being able to tell a story shortly. So Everything is Figureoutable. There's this whole Tropicana Orange story that if you've been in my audience, you know I've said it a gajillion times. But then with the Today Show, it's like my whole segment is 2 minutes and 45 seconds tops. I need to figure out
a long one.
I was going to say, I was like,
Today.
that was super generous. I have to figure out how to tell this origin story, which really is the setup for the whole entire concept and book. It explains everything. And I was so proud of myself to get that little guy down to 60 seconds or less. And I was going to, I was like, oh, here's
That's
my
great.
whole, like the origin story. Great. This is 17 seconds. Like I timed my messaging out so that I could hit those buttons and ideally be invited back. And I think that that's probably a good part of my obsessive nature. You know what I mean?
That's fabulous. And that is why you get asked back, because nobody in the control room is screaming from the back row, give her a rap, will you? Nobody is saying that. And that's a big problem. That's what those hosts live in fear of.
Yes.
That their guest is going to be a runaway train.
Yes.
And they're not going to be able to step in front.
Yes.
And so I just finished a really interesting project with Angela Duckworth.
Yes.
And she teaches an MBA class at Wharton. And she wanted me to work with her students on what we call their 60-second life story. And because one of the really difficult things that young people encounter is what is both the simplest question and the most dreaded question is, so tell me about yourself. And it sounds like it should be a layup, but it's not. And it's really a shot from half court, more like it. And most people go on this long, rambling recitation of their resume, which is not what you're supposed to do at all. And so we worked with all of her students to figure out what is a really concise story you can tell about something you experienced and how that story is symbolic of something that is critical to your personality and makes you distinctive. That's the formula for the 60-second story. And you start with, when I was 25, I got kicked out of my apartment, or whatever you decide to start the story with. It is not, well, I grew up in Riverdale and I went to school. That is not hooking anybody. And most people start that way.
Well, let's talk about story for a second too, because I think that is not only one of the most important components of any communication, but I'll tell you 2 times that I've crafted talks that I thought were semi-successful, I opened in a story in a dramatic moment. And it was not a happy kind of story. It was like in the moment of shit was crumbling. And those talks have been great. So tell us about storytelling and anything. We can talk about the Francis Ford Coppola, if you want, whatever. But the mistake that we make with stories and how we cannot have people's eyes glaze over.
We've often coached people at Clarity Media Group on how to start a big speech or start a big presentation. And we will tell them, start cold in the story. Don't warn them that you're about to tell a story. And we're trying to get people to break this habit of what we call signposting. It's all this talking about what you're going to talk about instead of just launching into it. And a lot of times we get a reaction of, well, don't you think the audience is going to wonder, where the hell is he going with this? It's like, that's great. That's engagement. Then now you have them mentally chewing on something, trying to figure out how you're going to get from point A to point D. And now you've got them. Whereas if you start with the dreaded agenda slide and telling them what to expect, people in the audience are thinking, okay, I got another 30 seconds before I have to pay attention to this guy. You're not going to hook them. And you mentioned Francis Ford Coppola. There's a chapter in the book that's talking about his storytelling formula. And he says that as a movie maker, you should figure out what your 3 best things are. And you should take your best thing and close the movie with it. You take your second best thing and you lead the movie with it. And then you find some natural place in the middle for your 3rd best. And he's talking about movie making, but movie making is storytelling. Giving a big speech or presentation, that's storytelling. And I often think that people don't necessarily appreciate the importance of hooking the audience right from the get-go, and also finishing with a bang, because there is this study we have in the book called the primacy recency effect that Studies have shown that what you say in the first minute or two and the last minute or two has higher engagement and higher retention than anything you say in the middle. So strategically placing your most important ideas goes a long way towards being memorable.
I want to talk about cliches because this is where I almost spit out my coffee this morning. I laughed so hard when I was gathering my notes. So I got to read this, y'all, because I have been on a crusade against this word and for a while. You wrote, "The spa that expresses their desire to be a part of my wellness journey." There's no journey happening. I'm just there for a massage. I cannot tell you, every time that somebody tells me they're taking me on a journey or if this is your journey, I'm like, I can't handle it. So cliches, you say the more you blend in, the less you stand out and the less memorable you are. There are other big ones. Are there ones that you've seen lately that you're like, can we just stick a fork in this thing and kill it once and for all?
Well, all across the ecosystem, and it's baked into our DNA, and we're going to be, doubling down on this and doing a deep dive on that, and all across the value chain. And it's like, what is this nonsense?
Oh my God. Can I tell you, you cured me of one. Cause I actually, I go deep on my interviews and I'm like, let's unpack. I was like, oh, Bill just called my ass out because unpack this or unpack that. Yeah. So it was really fun. Those are great.
It's interesting. Language is not unlike fashion.
Yeah.
And when you have a killer outfit and you love it, and then you get out on the street and a year later, and you realize, wow, everybody's like wearing what I've been wearing for a year. I think it's time to move on. Language is kind of the same thing. When at some point somebody said, let's unpack that. And I bet you somebody thought, oh, that's kind of a clever, interesting new way of saying it.
Yes.
And then it's no longer clever and new. It's tired and old and overused. It's now in that cliche category. Time to move on and create a new one.
Yes. Okay, levity. Because this was really interesting for me in the book. This distinction between, we all love humor, and we often talk about it in our company. We're like, no one doesn't want to have more fun.
Right.
Like every single person that I meet or encounter, it's like, we could all use more joy and levity in our life. So what's the distinction between, when people hear that, they're like, oh, I'm not funny. I don't know how to tell a joke. Yeah. And I love that you made that distinction. There's a difference between injecting humor or levity into your content versus telling a joke. So if you could unpack that. I'm just kidding. If you could talk to us about that, that would be awesome.
It's a subtle difference, but I've had a lot of communications executives over the years pull me aside right before I'm supposed to train an executive and say, could you do me a favor? Could you please tell him to stop leading every meeting with a joke? I know he thinks that it's his trademark and, that people love it. They don't. And nobody's willing to tell him. We need you to tell him. And start off with a joke. They'll love it is about as bad of advice as picture the audience in their underwear. That those two should be immediately discounted. Telling a joke is what professional comedians do. And listen, they make it look really easy on stage. It is not. That is the ultimate high wire act of communication. But if you can see the humorous side of something that you are already talking about, just put a humorous lens through which you want the audience to see it. That's the kind of levity that I'm suggesting. Having a little fun with something, as you said, it doesn't really matter what the topic is. People basically want to be entertained. They don't want to have to sit through something and feel like it's been tedium from start to finish.
Yes.
They want a little levity, a little break. They want you to help them see it through a very different, unorthodox lens. And, there's usually some opportunity in every speech or presentation that I coach people to just have that moment of fun and just to break up the monotony, because it does become monotonous.
Yes. So it also speaks a little bit to energy. And this was one of the other things that...
But you've got great energy on camera, by the way.
Thank you.
Absolutely spectacular.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And, with my team, who I love them, there are days, which I'm for almost all of us, right? I try my best to be a professional, but some days I'm just like, mama's exhausted or, something, it's just not lining up. Anywho, I've always told my team, like, hey, I'm going to do a couple takes of X, Y, or Z because I have to put on different hats. There's like right now we're in our content creation hat. Sometimes if I'm doing ads for a course or then I'm in my teacher zone or whatever, and I try and bring fresh or different energy. And there's been times there's like, Marie, I don't think the energy's right in this one. And I laugh so friggin' hard when I think when you were in your previous careers, like, Bill, the energy just wasn't there. And I love that you said like, what does that mean? Should I start flailing my arms or talk with my hands or speak? Like, it is the most frustrating bit of feedback that's really non-feedback because it's so unactionable and unspecific. And I just wanted to highlight this because it was one of the most useful things I've read in a while. So thank you. Your definition of energy is your visible enthusiasm for the value of the information you're sharing. I was like, dude, I get it. Because there's been times if I'm being perfectly honest, I'm like, do I need to make this ad again? Like I've said this so many times, and that was on me. I needed to find, or I knew to find that visible enthusiasm. So let's just talk about energy for a minute, because I do think that that's so critical. Josh and I have talked about this a bunch, and he's been really instrumental for me because he can detect, probably most people can too, if I am doing Marie, meaning like a little bit of over the top energy because I am authentically not feeling it, versus he's like, you can just be you. I'm like, oh, I'm afraid that that's boring. So let's just talk about the power of energy in presentations.
It's definitely important to lead by example.
Yeah.
And you're trying to get an audience jazzed about something.
Yes.
And if they don't detect that you're enthusiastic about how transformational this could be for them, or not, it doesn't even have to be transformational, just helpful.
Yes.
And you're putting out an idea to them, and try to always have in the back of your mind, wow, if they take this to heart, it could make an enormous difference in their daily life.
Yes.
And to be able, through your tone of voice and everything, convey this sense of, just imagine how great it would be if, because you were speaking in a more concise way, every meeting that was 40 minutes became 30 minutes. Just imagine how great that would be for your day. Not instead of just rolling from one meeting to the other and having that fatigue setting in. Imagine having 10 minutes to just listen to music back at your desk. And what I think most speakers need to do is project in a very detailed way how good the outcome could be.
Yes.
And what that looks like over the rise. Like, I've seen how good that can be. And so that's why it's so important to be concise.
Yeah. And it's like it's selling the dream. Like, oftentimes if we're talking about in a business context, if I'm helping people fall in love with, or my attempt to help people fall in love with marketing and selling, I'm like, sell them the dream. To your point, you know what's possible on the other side of this obstacle or them getting through X, Y, or Z. And it's like, you have to be enthusiastic about it. And I love sometimes a little reality TV, not all the time, but I think Ryan Serhant, who, do you know Ryan?
Yeah, I don't, no.
So I don't know him personally, but I've seen him on enough things. And there was one clip in his Netflix, it's like Selling Manhattan. I might get that name wrong, but I loved what he said, because he's like, selling is the transfer of enthusiasm, the transfer of, and I was like, bingo. So
absolutely.
Comes back to this energy thing and this energy idea, because even if you're not selling a product or service, you are selling an idea. You're selling something that in your communication, you're trying to get other people to at least pay attention to or consider.
I'm so aware of that, especially in the hospitality industry. You know, when people show you a room in the hotel, and when they tell me, oh, this is the best room in the hotel, I don't know, it doesn't excite me. But if they show me, if they bring me up and say, you know what I love about this room? You can see the corner of Hyde Park just over there. That has a lot more credibility for me than this broad, generic sell job.
Yes.
It's now got a piece of them in it as well. And it's just amazing to me how many people in companies who have gone through sales training don't know how to sell.
Yes. Yes. So one of the big pieces in the book is the Magnificent Seven. So, right, your tools for making your words stick. What are, like, there's 7 of them. They're amazing. Again, as I've told you guys, get the damn book. I think it is one of these books that if anyone's going to turn a camera on or start to prepare a presentation or a speech or anything, it's like, you got to open the book. I will. What is one of your favorites of Magnificent Seven? Like, we've talked about original definitions, not really what that is, because I just went right into energy, but what's another one of your favorite?
The creative label I love. And, you know, if anybody is a fan of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yes.
Larry David has made a living on the creative label. In fact, every episode hangs on some creative label, whether it's Stop and Chat or Chat and Cut or The Big Goodbye or The Big Salad from Seinfeld days. Every single episode has some kind of creative label, siren abuse, and they're memorable. They stick in your mind. In fact, we were working with someone yesterday and they were talking about the idea of a total addressable market for a product or a service. This was somebody from a venture capital firm. And the idea was, don't think about the depth of the TAM. Think about the breadth of the TAM. And so one of the recommendations that we were making to this person was, what if you put just the word TAM on a piece of silly putty and you stretch the silly putty horizontally so it widened? And in fact, we could give this a creative label. We could call it the silly putty principle. And she goes, I love that. And now a lot of people would probably say, the audience is going to think I'm a moron if I do something like that. It's like, no, actually, they're going to remember that because it doesn't sound anything like any other pitch, any other presentation they've heard in the last 12 months. And I guarantee you they will take it away. Yes.
And it's memorable. And I often think about this. I've often thought about this in our own work. Like, I love infomercials. I will make no beef. I grew up on infomercials. I was like, if I was going to have another career, if I could have done infomercials, I would have been great at it. And I've always wanted to demonstrate stuff. And what you just took was this concept and you actually physicalized it, which I think, and also imagery, it's like, that's brilliant.
You know, we have, as human beings, these movie reels spinning through our heads at all times, and we're very visual creatures.
Yeah.
We need to grab a hold of pictures to make sense out of the world around us. And when people get up in front of a room and they speak in a very abstract and theoretical way, they're not feeding images to those movie reels that are spinning.
Yes.
And when you don't do that, your audience makes up their own images to fill that reel. And that's what daydreaming is.
Yes.
People will grab a hold of something to visualize if you're not giving it to them. So when you're in front of a room of people, ruthlessly gain control of that movie reel in your audience's head and fill it with images of every point that you can make. It sounds more difficult than it is, but you have to speak in a visual, specific, and anecdotal way, as opposed to theoretical, abstract, and vague.
Ooh, I love it. In fact, it brings right to where I wanted to go next, was the notion of a 10-minute warning. This was something I feel like is really, really important, especially in a context if you are selling, if there is a webinar kind of thing. So what is the 10-minute warning? And tell me about what are some easy tips that people can use when they know they're coming up to, let's say, and does it happen at every 10 minutes?
Yes, it does. And I was a little skeptical. This is a study, and we have it cited in the book, that the maximum amount of time you can count on the attention of your audience is 10 minutes. And at the 10-minute mark, something has to change. It cannot be just more of the same from the first 10 minutes. And which I thought, 10 minutes, that sounds long to me. But anyway, and so when I'm working with people who have to speak for 30 minutes, say, and they have maybe 3 video clips they want to use in this presentation, I'll tell them, let's space them out. Let's start. You have a sizzle reel. I understand you want to lead with that. We'll put that right at the top. Reel 2 will go at the 10-minute mark, and reel 3 will go at the 20-minute mark. And so we have them evenly spaced out. So every 10 minutes, something is happening that represents a change, or it could be an exercise, or it could be you showing the results of a study, or just something to break up the patterns.
Yes.
And in fact, pattern disruption is what keeps the audience's attention to a much higher degree than just more of the same in a very narrow range.
I want to talk about prepping and rehearsing, because I believe, right, you're a very big fan, prepping and rehearsing.
Big believer.
I'm curious of your take on memorizing scripts, talk word for word. And I want to tell you some context here. That has been when I need to show up in a high stakes situation. So Oprah was having this thing called Super Soul Talks. This was back in like 2016. And they asked me to come do it. And it was like, you have 18 minutes. And I'm also, again, most people know this about me. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I'm a maniac when it comes to like certain things. And that's both how I torture myself and also how I succeed. So do you know what I mean? It's a
Talk about the double-edged sword, right?
It 100%. It's got its pluses and its minuses. And I was so, for obvious reasons, terrified of messing that up.
Doesn't get much more high stakes than that.
So I scripted out that talk, and Bill, I drilled every damn word into my body because I knew I was going to be freaked out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? On that stage, seeing Miss Oprah Winfrey, who I've loved and admired for years, like staring up at me like, don't, not that she was
deliver it, girl. Yes, yeah.
You better make my team make a good choice. Hope we did right. And I've done that a few times. Like I developed a new talk within the last couple of years, and it was on a topic. We have a program that's called Time Genius. And that was another one of the talks where I dropped in drama story first and then went throughout the content. And that was more of not an 18-minute talk, but that's like close to a 60-minute talk. And so it was a brain challenge. I'm like, can I memorize that? And while they were all my stories, again, I write all my own stuff, but I was like, how the hell am I going to memorize something word for word for 60 minutes? But I did it.
Yeah.
Is there another way? Because it's daunting to me.
It's funny.
Very daunting.
I just had this happen a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
I had to give a talk at an event, and there were no slides, no script, no nothing, and you're just hanging out there. And so what I did was, excuse me, I wrote it out because I feel with my TV background, I can write for the ear.
Yep.
And then what I did with that was I collapsed it then into bullets. So I pared it down language-wise. And then I merely gave topic headers. So I had, say, 1 through 12, like you'd almost have for slides. And topic 1 was going to be about levity, and topic 2 was going to be about brevity. And what was important to me was understanding what's the segue line that gets me from topic 1 to topic 2, because that's where people most struggle.
Yes.
And so the segue lines that helped me stitch all this together were the last to go off the card. I wanted to really know those backwards and forwards. And like you, I just said it 10, 12 times. There's
mine was more like 500, but yes, keep going.
there's an 8-to-1 ratio that if you've got a 15-minute talk, you should be practicing out loud for 2 hours.
This is great. Please say that again, because I need to hear it again.
Sure. For every minute of content, you should be practicing and rehearsing out loud for 8 minutes. So you should be doing it 8 times at least.
At least.
So let's say you've got to do a presentation on a Friday, do it a couple times on Monday, a couple times on Tuesday, and so on.
Yes.
And that's usually what it takes in order to really know and own the content. Now, that's assuming that you wrote it and you did and I did.
Yeah.
But if you haven't written it, I would say that ratio is probably 16-to-1.
Yeah.
In order to really get it under your belt. Steve Jobs, who people think was born with some great orator gene, he wasn't. He put in the hard work and he practiced every product launch keynote 70 times. And so by the time he got on stage, he knew every move. There was nothing that was going to come up to surprise him. He knew all the transitions. He knew all the punchlines, so that when he went to deliver it, he was no longer focusing on what word comes next. He's focusing on, here's where I drop my voice and keep up the intensity to make this point hit deeper. So he's able to free himself from the content recall considerations and now focus on the tools that make the execution memorable.
Yes. It's so
varying your
fascinating.
pace, your pitch, your projection, and using your voice as the musical instrument it is in order to keep people captivated.
It's so wild. I've often had these conversations in my head, and I'm curious if you've ever thought of this too. So I'm thinking of two people in particular that I know them both. I love them both. A dear friend who's like so gifted, Marianne Williamson. Do you know who she is?
Yes, sure.
I've known Marianne for a very long time, and I've seen so many of her talks. And I would always just sit there and watch Marianne, and I'm like, she is a genius. Because I don't know, I haven't asked her, but I actually think I might have asked her once if she prepares, but I think she's got a gift from like another place. And then my other colleague friend, I'm sure you've seen like Gary Vaynerchuk, like sometimes he just goes on stage, and I always have like such like admiration. Do you know what I mean? Admiration. I'm just like, I don't know what planet y'all were born on. I was not born on that planet, but I like so admire and respect that. I just feel those are special humans, right? Like I'm not think it's just. Yeah,
I think there is. It's not like Robin Williams was in comedy.
Yes.
You know, you can't replicate that.
Yes.
But I do feel that there's also a group of people who work so hard on something that they achieve that state of flow where they make it look effortless.
Absolutely.
Like watching somebody like Roger Federer play tennis, and he makes it look so effortless that you actually watch it and delude yourself. Yeah, I bet I can go down there and like hit a few with him. And you just lose all perception of how incredibly difficult this is.
Oh, you know who else is like that? Another pal, Tony Robbins. Like I'll sit and talk with Tony. Well, here's one of the things I know about him specifically. It's like he has been doing his craft for decades and decades and decades. And that so much of his content and so much of his wisdom and ideas, like they live so deeply in his body that he can then on stage. Like I've just seen him in so many different contexts, and I was like, yes, like I don't know. When I watch great people, and actually I'll say this too. I think like Ramit, dear friend, I'm like, he was on the show not so long ago. We just had such a ball because he can play so well in this context where I know he knows exactly where we're going sometimes, and then we can take guitar solos, and it's an awesome
unspoken
gift.
communication, which is so delightful. And people like Tony Robbins, you know, he doesn't have the 10,000 hours of, he's got the 200,000 hours.
Million hours. Yeah, no, brother doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about prep and practice a little bit more, because I think that it is underrated. It's something that the more comfortable I am, like I remember I really loved my book tour because I was just so in it, you know, and every day I loved getting in beast mode when it's appropriate. And it was just so alive in my body that I could get to that flow state with so much of that content. I wouldn't be like that today if we just did a whole interview on my book, but prep and practicing. Let's say they can get your book, but they're not able to work with a coach. Like, is there anything that works or what doesn't besides sheer repetition? For example, sometimes I will do my rehearsing like in the morning, take a break and just give my subconscious time, and then, kind of revisit it, like almost spaced repetition in a way, or I don't think I'm actually pulling the right term there, but it's an idea or a concept that's relevant in language learning. It's almost like you alternate the space. Someone will correct me on it somewhere. But are there tips or tools that work or that don't work when it comes to prepping and practicing? Should people film themselves? Anything you want to share on that?
That's the number one.
Yeah.
That's the number one tip, because the video doesn't lie like your friends do. When you come off a podium and you say, how did I do? Don't ever ask somebody, how did I do? Because people lie and they say, oh, you were great. Yeah. You should come off the stage and say, give me 2 things I should do differently next time.
Oh,
really
God.
swing the door open.
You're so strong. God, I feel you're so much stronger than I am. I'm so vulnerable when I come off stage. I feel like I'm like a little baby Bambi.
But you deep down, Marie, know it went well. I mean, there has to be a certain awareness that that was pretty good, and I felt the energy from the audience. But I'm a perfectionist.
Yes.
And I need to know what are the 2 things I don't do differently next time.
Yes.
So that is helpful, and people are reluctant to give critical feedback. But the video is so important. If you look at professional sports, players are watching video of what happened 5 minutes ago instead of waiting 3 days, because it's such a great learning tool. And the majority of people are completely unaware that they're speaking fast, that they have all these verbal and physical tics that detract from their executive presence. And recording people in our training sessions is just standard. And of course, it elicits the number one thing that people say, which is, you're not going to make me watch that now, are you? Like, everybody says that. So I get how cringy it can be. But it does reveal an awful lot. And when we show people the video back, 90% of the people make the same observation, and that is, wow, I look kind of bored. They're amazed at how flat they are. And they thought, wait a minute, I was just up there. I was really bringing it. I was like lively. I was animated. And where did that guy go?
Oh my God.
And so they realize from watching the video that what probably feels a little over the top to you is probably just about right.
I've learned that. And I'll tell you, I remember in my fitness days, I had never been the lead in a fitness video before. And that was a dream of mine. I was always like the backup girl. And when I was getting up, taking those steps, they made me put myself on tape. And here I am thinking I'm doing like all these dance fitness things. I'm like, ooh, I'm the best. I saw that video, Bill. My arm. Do you know what I mean? I was like, oh, girl, you got to get your shit together.
Right,
I was like, I'm here. So the video, it's like, it is cringy. It is hard, but damn, does it work?
It does. And I think what it also exposes for people is that they sometimes go into a big communication opportunity with the wrong mindset, that they define success as the absence of mistakes. And perfection is not what you're going for. If you define the absence of mistakes as your goal, then you will flatten out. You will play not to lose. And you ask anybody in professional sports, when you start playing not to lose, you lose instead of going for it. And I tell people, I could care less if you have a little stumble here, a little hiccup there. Who cares? Nobody's going to remember that. But they will remember that you brought it with real energy. And sometimes when people get freed of that burden, it relaxes them and they're able to really execute.
Let's talk AI and technology. I love that you had a chapter in the end about AI. I thought this was so good. And somewhere in the book, you wrote that using our ability to communicate is like a muscle. And if we don't use it, it atrophies. So I see so much AI communication, mostly in email these days. And it is staggering. I cannot believe how many people like want me to give them money. And I'm like, dude, all of the AI tells and all your stupid emojis and all the triples. I'm like, come on, like you got to do a little better than that. So tell me about your take on AI. How, because I think that there's a huge opportunity that is going to continue to grow for people that actually know how to communicate and that actually know how to be original and that actually know how to connect, because there's so much freaking garbage. It's like it's terrible. So I want to hear your perspective and how can we train ourselves to be so original and so authentic and so unforgettable that no bot is gonna compete?
Well, the reason I put the AI chapter in the book, Marie, is because I found it so central to the theme of the book. And that is, when we communicate, the idea is to be memorable and to stand above the noise and to stand out and be distinctive. And to me, relying on AI is completely antithetical to that. And what you're really doing by relying on that for content creation is you're exacerbating this numbing sameness of the way people communicate that makes people tune out. And there's also just something very odd about hearing somebody deliver something that you know was the result of the amalgamation of millions of other people's thinking that now is so watered down and undistinctive.
Yes.
And like you said, I think because that's going to gain more prominence, I think the need to have somebody write something or somebody say something through a lens that is different, where I bet in a couple of short years, somebody will read something that you've said, scream job, whatever it is, and they will say, no large language model could have come up with that. And that will be a badge of honor.
Yes.
And I think the people who are not allowing that muscle to atrophy are going to be rewarded.
I agree with that. I think about it too in the context of business and the context of customer service.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is a little bit off to the side of communication, but I think it's all connected, where there is such a disintegration of that human connectivity in customer experience, being able to actually talk to someone who understands what the hell's going on, someone that's giving you their full undivided attention and they're hearing your issue and wanting to solve it. I just think the more humanness we can bring to every aspect of our quote unquote customer journey, looking at it through a business lens, from that first interaction all the way through, there's a huge opportunity to win. Huge.
And even just the act of listening.
Yes.
People treat listening as the time they have to wait before they say their next thing. Instead of what you're doing here is you're listening to my answers and you're rolling with that and it's influencing the next thing you say. That's what's called a conversation. and that's a dying art.
Yes.
And I've been doing a lot of podcasts, obviously, with this book, and I'm enjoying this conversation immensely. And
probably because I read the book.
That was that's a big bonus. That's a big bonus. So you know what to ask. But even in some highly touted ones, there's been a little bit of going down the list of pre-prepared questions and this fear of deviating off of that, which, it can feel like the high wire act without the net, but you absolutely have to take those chances. You have to wander outside your comfort zone. And there's a quote in the book from Eleanor Roosevelt who said, you should do one thing every day that scares you. And I feel as though that can be adapted to public speaking. Every public speaking opportunity, you should do one thing that scares you.
I love that.
Yeah. And try something new. Just one thing. It doesn't have to be radically transformative, but if you saw somebody give a speech or a presentation 2 weeks ago and they did something that really captivated you, jot it down. Realize, that person's personal style is a little similar to mine. Maybe I can borrow that technique and road test it. Write it down, try it out, see if it works for you.
You and your team have worked with platforms like TikTok and Meta, right? Which are part of, I think, this cultural shift that we've experienced where attention spans are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Is there any lesson that you've learned in this world that's addicted to like 15-second content? I think, when I was reading the book, and there's some classic, really important principles about openings and closings, where it's like the opening hook is everything. So I'm curious if you have any reflections or lessons, whether it was from just how our culture has shifted in that way, or things that you're like, hooks are more important than ever.
Yeah. There's no question. I mean, when I was a kid, it was about having the channel changer.
Yeah.
Right? The remote. And now it's this.
How do we stop the scroll?
How do you stop the scroll? And the competition to kill the scroll is so intense that it has distorted the way we communicate. I think that opening 3 to 4 seconds is critical to get people to just stop and watch for a second.
Yeah.
But I think there will probably be a number of different camps of people who they want to consume all their information in 15-second little nuggets. And then there are some people who will rebel against that and want something deeper, more thoughtful, more insightful, and will feel unfulfilled by the empty calories of 15 seconds.
I think it's important. It's been something that I've had to kind of navigate and dance with just because, and I love it. I love having done this for a long enough time to have perspective to watch things shift and change. And it's always something that I'm playing with myself too, because, you know, I can look at data and I can hear from like, there's tons of experts now in each platform. And sometimes I'm like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
like, do you know what I mean? Like,
I want to do what feels like in my power alley.
And intentional, of service of my audience, authentic to what I genuinely care about. And I'm like, you know, it's like I can't really do all the cheap tricks. I know, you know, it doesn't feel aligned. And it's just it's an interesting thing.
Yeah. I think it's really important not to play somebody else's game.
Yes.
And I remember years and years ago when disco was really big and the Stones came out with a couple of songs that were kind of a nod to disco, and everybody thought, oh, did you really have to do that? You know, and they were sort of pilloried for it, and deservedly so.
Yeah.
And so I think knowing what you're good at and sticking with that is important. Doesn't mean you can't experiment with other things, but trying to transform yourself into something you're not is not a good strategy.
Not a good strategy. So as we wrap, if someone's about to pitch an idea, right, or they're about to launch a product or they're about to go on camera, is there one sentence or one idea that you would want them to put on a little Post-it note before they go on so that they could be unforgettable every time?
I would say that if you could figure out a way to create an analogy for the value of what it is you're pitching, that could be really powerful. And you draw the analogy to something that has already proven to be really valuable. So years ago, Sheryl Sandberg was doing an interview, and this was before privacy really genuinely became an issue for Facebook. And she was asked the privacy question. And she said, well, you know, I can remember when caller ID first came out. There was all this uproar that my privacy was being invaded, and there were calls to regulate it. There were calls to ban it. You know, I don't know anybody today who isn't 100% reliant on caller ID. And it was a great historical analogy because she's basically saying in that story, yeah, I know you think there are some issues with Facebook, but it's all going to turn out great. And all that fear and hesitation is going to be unfounded. And it will become just this daily tool that you use and can't imagine living without. So that short little analogous story accomplished an awful lot for her.
I love that. And I think it takes work too. It's like to be a powerful, memorable communicator. It's like you got to sit down and strap yourself in and
it
try
does.
on
And you know, whether it's on your phone or a moleskin or whatever, you know, we're out for a walk, we're out for a drive, you're out for a run, whatever it is. Those are when the really good ideas come to you.
Yes.
And try to jot them down. And because 90% of what you think about, you forget. And realize, oh, that's a really interesting thing that woman said in that interview. That's a really interesting story. Maybe I'll use that story when I lead my next presentation. And think, I'm in anecdote acquisition mode. I need to be observant of everything going around me in the world and realize, how is that a parallel to what I have to talk about a lot? And I'll just bring it into play.
Creating, you know, my best friend and I always talked about this too with our talks, because we both struggle in the same ways. But it's also great for writing in terms of books or any content creation, is like story banking of writing down those simple little stories that in the afternoon or, you know, something's going on when you're cooking or whatever, that to your point, I know this happens to me all the time, is something's really funny or it happens in a workout class. And then if I don't write it down, dude, it is gone.
Yeah, never to come back.
Never to come back. But some like little anecdotes have literally turned into enormous bits of my content. And so I'm constantly working on that skill. Yeah. Like working on that muscle.
That is incredible time well spent.
Yes. Okay. Anything that you want to leave our audience with besides get your hands on this book if you want to communicate better?
Well, what you said earlier was the best compliment that I love, and that is that you found it funny and you laughed, because there are a lot of self-help books out there that are, a little medicinal,
yes,
shall we say?
Yes.
And I wanted this to be a fun, enjoyable read for people.
Oh,
so the fact that you found it like that, I'm very grateful.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you for the invite. It's a fun conversation.
Super fun. So you can direct any of your questions, comments. If you got something big coming up, you know what firm you need to go to. But most importantly, get your little paws on this book, because it is fantastic. And until next time, stay on your game and keep going for your big dreams, because the world needs that very special gift that only you have. We'll catch you soon. Hey, if you loved this video, you need to watch this one next. Trust me on that.